Hello there! So, the time has come for me to answer that most mysterious of questions. Where am I for my grand adventure? Well, you find me here on the banks of the Daugava River. It's this wonderful river here, in the city of Riga, the capital of Latvia. Behind me, that building you can see there, is Riga Castle, the residence of the President of Latvia. I'm not going to be stopping by for drinks, I don't think, unfortunately. There's the cathedral over there. I'm on the western side of the Daugava here. You might very well ask, why am I in Riga? Well, this weekend is my 30th birthday on Sunday and I wasn't doing anything, so I thought, why not pop away somewhere? So why Riga? What is it about Riga that makes me want to visit Riga? Well, firstly, I've never met a Latvian, I don't think. So that was one reason. I've now met two. I met the lovely customs lady who was nice enough not to submit me to any dangerous internal searches, and the bus driver who was kind enough to give me a ticket. So both very kind on that score, I think. But also Riga has a fascinating history. In fact, this entire part of the world has a very interesting history. It's one of the last places in Europe that was sort of properly Christianized. It resisted Christianity for a very long time. There is a lot of more recent history as well, obviously during the USSR period and in the 90s and the breaking away of Latvia and Estonia and its other Baltic countries. So there's a lot of things to look at here, a lot of things to talk about. I am slightly hindered by the fact, of course, I don't speak any Latvian, and in fact my facility with Slavic languages full stop is really restricted to a few terrible words of Polish. That's my Polish that are terrible, they're not terrible words. Though I have picked up two words which I think would be very useful, Svieki, which is hello, and Paldis, which is thank you. Although it has left me in the rather awkward position, of course, that I won't be able to end a conversation with people politely, so I will just have to keep talking to them forever. So I shall choose very carefully how I deploy those two. So yes, you are going to get... I'm going to do a series of these videos like I did on my other adventures. They're probably not going to be in chronological order. I am planning to cover in little sound bites more or less the whole history of Riga, which is quite the task for my 4-day stay here. They won't be in chronological order, I don't think. The one later tonight will be more or less the start. That will cover about 1000 AD up to about 1200 AD, I think. After that, they're probably going to slip out of order a bit, depending on how I turn up and do things. If you want to see them in order, I am going to roughly edit them together somehow and put them on YouTube when I get home. So if you want to see the whole story, Riga through my eyes, it will be available on YouTube. Until then, I will leave you with this lovely view of the Daugava, me desperately hoping that this cloud above me doesn't break, because it was supposed to be raining and the weather says it now is not going to be, but it is a little bit. And I shall leave you with that for now. See you later. So I'm now sitting on the banks of the Daugava, on the other side. I've crossed the bridge, it's just over there. And I thought, I was going to talk a little bit about the sort of early proto-medieval people who lived here, the tribal peoples before this was one country. But before I do, I should just share this glass box behind me. It tells about a local legend. There's a little sign there as a statue of a man. You can't really see him very well from here. It tells a local legend about a man who, a very tall man before the city of Riga was founded, who carried a child across this great river that's in front of me over there, and received a great chest of gold for his efforts, which is strange because usually if you carry a child across a river you get a stern talking to from the police, in my experience. But nevertheless, obviously the Rigan police weren't quite on peak that day. I suppose they had a good excuse because the city hadn't been founded yet. But anyway, yes. So let's talk about the peoples who lived in this area in the early, the very early Middle Ages. So we're talking just after the Viking Age, really, the very end of the tail end of the Viking Age, about the year 1000. And in this part of the world, you have a few peoples living, a few tribal peoples. Now, we use the term collectively because it's an easy summary. It's not, they shouldn't be seen as sort of nations or countries in the same way that, you know, Anglo-Saxon England was at the time, or France was, or anything like that. They're really grouped as a matter of convenience because they were linked by common bonds, those common bonds mostly being religion and, which at the time was pagan religion rather than Christianity, but also cultural bonds and familial ones as well. So yeah, there were a few different groups around here. So the Daugava, which is also sometimes called the West Neva River, on the south side of it, so roughly in that direction, you have the Letigallians, the people who live on that side. To the north, you have the Samogitians and the Solonians, the two different names for one set of people, really. Around Riga area and slightly up the side of the coast towards what is now Estonia, you have the Lets, and then just a little bit further west than here, along the bit that goes down to meet now what is now Kaliningrad in Poland, you have the Curonians. Now, they were primarily farming peoples. It was mostly agricultural, sort of subsistence living. There was a local nobility in place. The local nobles were actually fairly well off. They pretty much were living on a par with nobles from other parts of Europe at the time. And yeah, primarily agricultural. There was a little bit of industry. One of the big Baltic industries always has been. Still, I've only been in the city 5 hours or so, and I've already seen more tat on this, based off this industry, on market stalls than I have anywhere since I was in Gdansk. And that was the big industry. That was amber, which they pulled out of the Baltic. Fossilized amber made into jewelry and things. So yeah, the local peoples. They grouped together the sort of the loose confederacy of the Letigallians and whatnot. They would group together and band together to fight off any threats to them collectively, because obviously they're on a border here with the peoples of Rus, Novgorod, and Kievan Rus later, the Russic peoples that would eventually form Russia. Some of them were sort of paying tribute to those people as well. But yeah, it's the tail end of the Viking Age. The Vikings aren't really that Viking anymore. And actually the tables have rather turned. The Swedes and the Danes are now the ones being raided. And they are being raided by people from around here, from the Baltic side of things, from a little bit further west into the area of sort of North Germany now, Pomerania, places like that, and also the Finno-Ugric people who would eventually form Finland and places like that. So that is the historical context, the very early historical context, the pre-Christian historical context. Groups of loose people linked by family, by faith, and by sort of common defensive need. Well, hello ladies and gentlemen, I am back. It is the next day, the next afternoon in fact. I spent a very enjoyable morning going around various museums and other sites. I'm now standing in the lovely Cathedral Square here in the Old Town. The building that is behind me here, as you will no doubt guess from its lovely brick Gothic structure, very typically Baltic rather, not Balkan in its construction, is Riga Cathedral. It's now a Lutheran cathedral. It hasn't always been. It was Catholic until the Reformation. And it's that early phase that I really want to talk about now, because it's another very definitive part in the history of the city. So we spoke a little bit yesterday about the pre-Christian peoples. Let's talk about how they came to be Christianized, because it's not a very pleasant story for the locals. They didn't really want to be Christianized. They were quite happy as pagans, thank you very much. But as is so often the case with these things, the Christians decided, nah, you should definitely be Christian. Spain. So the first mention we get of an attempt to Christianize the local people actually is from a chronicler called Adam of Bremen, who mentions that he had a conversation with Svein II of Denmark, that is not Svein Forkbeard, who is a slightly more prominent king, from a bit earlier. Svein II is probably most famous as being considered the last of the Viking kings. He's the last of the ones who really makes an effort on the old Viking thing and doesn't decide, you know what, I'm going to stay at home with my feet up and a nice warm fire going. But Svein mentions that he tried to build a church. He built a church in the lands of Curonia, so not very far from here at all. We don't then have any further record of that. We don't even know when he did it. We know roughly his reign dates, but other than that, we don't know where he did it. And the next effort that we have for Christianization comes from a chap called Meinhard of Segerborg, who is a monk, who is a very pious man in the records. He's a very pious man who wants to spread the faith to this part of the world. So he comes here from northern Germany. He starts trying to Christianize the locals. He builds a church here. He takes up a sort of ministerial post unofficially. And he works for about 11 years until about 1196. He founds the church in 1185. In 1196, he dies. And that's it. And that is more or less the end of his endeavours. We don't hear anything more of him. And his mission generally seems to have failed, essentially. There is no persistent Christianity here. So the next attempt, 2 years later after he dies, Berthold of Hanover is appointed as Bishop of Livonia. That's the name for this part of the world back then. And he comes with him, but having seen that peaceful conversion has failed, he brings an army. He brings with him an army of Germans on a crusade, essentially, to force conversion up here. Now, that is one of the first examples we see of what we call the Northern Crusades. We know a lot about the Levantine Crusades, the Holy Land Crusades for the Holy Land, Jerusalem, but of course there are crusades in other parts of the world as well, in Iberia, in the south of France, but also in this part of Northern Europe. So it's all right, just changing my hand position there. So yeah, he brings an army. 24th of July 1198, same year. He arrives in about sort of January to March time. He's killed by one of the locals with a lance, we're told. This, it has to be said, doesn't go down awfully well in Rome. So then we have... sorry, minor interruption there. I pressed the wrong button whilst trying to rejig my phone. Yes, so this doesn't go down awfully well in Rome. We have Pope Innocent III as the Pope at the time, and 1199 he declares a formal crusade against this part of the world, and this is the start of the Northern Crusades. He appoints a new Bishop of Livonia, a man called Albert, who lands in what is now the Bay of Riga, and who essentially founds the city of Riga. He builds not quite this cathedral, but a precursor to this cathedral. And he attempts to establish, a lot more successfully it has to be said, through various bits of brutality, Christianity in the area. Paganism doesn't quite disappear entirely, and in fact it lingers on, and bits of it linger on for quite a while. Supposedly this cathedral in the old cemetery, which I'm not actually sure where it is, it's not here anymore, but supposedly the cemetery at least is built on an old pagan site, where there was supposedly a four-handed sacrificial pit and things, but of course these are reports coming from Christians, so they might not be entirely accurate. You have to treat them with a slight bit of skepticism, as they were trying to, as they saw it, civilise the area. So this bit of the world becomes the heart of a new effort. It assumes the name the Terra Mariana. This part of the world becomes the Terra Mariana, the land of Mary. It's a typically histrionic name for a place. And authority here is essentially divided between the Bishop of Livonia, with his seat here at the cathedral, and a order of crusading brothers called the Order of the Livonian Brothers of the Sword. Very grand sounding name for them. And initially they start, you sort of come and you do your term in the Livonian order, then they become more established and they start recruiting more permanently. So the authority divided between those two. Now that doesn't last forever. In about 1221, Riga has become a very important merchant town. There's a lot of trading goes on. It has quite a nice commanding position on the Balkans. The Baltic, why do I keep saying the Balkans? Sorry, the Baltic. So it becomes a very key trading town. And by 1221, the merchants have got enough power to essentially demand from the Archbishop that they be allowed to run the city of Riga itself. And so that then becomes a sort of tripartite system of governance between the two, the three rather, the order, the Archbishop, and the bishop and the merchants. And then by this point, the rest of Northern Europe, this part of Northern Europe, so in Prussia, and places like that, has also started to be Christianized. The Northern Crusades have expanded a little. One of the holy orders that were founded in the Middle East, the Teutonic Knights, the probably third most well-known of the knightly orders down there, have moved back up to here. They are Teutonic, they are German, so they come and take the lead in that and form the state of the Teutonic Order. And eventually, after a couple of nasty defeats, Volquin, the last independent master of the Brothers of the Sword, submits to the Teutonic Knights, and they become basically a branch of the Teutonic Knights in this area. So yes, so that is the rough and quick history of the early Christianization of this area. I say rough in multiple senses because it was certainly rough on the locals. But yeah, some of the traditions, some of the pagan traditions do last a little bit longer. And in fact, even I've not long come out of the Latvian Museum of War, which is an exceptionally interesting museum. It has some fantastic stuff on the First World War in particular. They talk about what are essentially Christianized versions of sort of pagan protective spells that soldiers would carry with them into battle, and they have a few examples there which are very interesting. The other story that we have that's from a bit later that's also sort of about Christianization is a man called Thies of Kaltenbrunn. This is in the 17th century, the mid-17th century. And Thies is when the Swedes are running that part of Livonia. And Thies declares himself to be a werewolf. Just says he's a werewolf, and he goes to hell with 3 friends to fight demons. And naturally the church isn't awfully happy with that. They don't like people, being werewolves. You've seen the films, you know what it's like. So yes, so that's possibly another little bit of a legacy of sort of local mythology that ends up coming back. Thies doesn't come out of it awfully well. Incidentally, he's put on trial. He's declared to be sane because all of his mates say he's generally of sound mind, apart from the werewolf thing. He's put on trial and is punished for his heresy. So yes, so there you go, a potted history of the Christianization of Riga. The next chronological bit we'll be talking about is actually something we just touched upon. We touched upon 1221, when the merchants demand command of the city. And that's the next bit we're going to be talking about, because that's the point where I get really interested. It's one of the main reasons I wanted to come to Riga. We start talking about merchant dominance and merchant control of the city. So I shall sign off for now, and I shall see you a bit later for that. Well, good morning everybody. It is an absolutely glorious day here. I have even taken my jumper off, although I do still have it with me for safekeeping. I'm a cautious fellow. I wanted to move on to really the next bit of Rigan history, of interesting Rigan history, and this is the one that gets me very, very excited. So, at the end of yesterday's section, the one where we were talking about the Christianization of the area, we mentioned that in 1221, the local citizens and the burghers, that's burghers with an H, not without an H, demanded essential control of the city from the bishop, from the church. Now, that really sets the scene for the next phase. So I am here in this lovely square, and behind me, this building here, is a building called the House of the Blackheads. This was not a particularly wretched hangout for teenagers, but for a guild called the Brotherhood of the Blackheads. I have some notes here because I'm less familiar with this bit than others. So yes, this building was built in the 14th century, rather, about 1344, I think. It was a guild for unmarried merchants, foreigners and ship owners. Unfortunately, the building itself was burnt down, was bombed down during the war when the Germans were pushing into this part of the world. But it was rebuilt in the 90s to its original specifications, more or less, to produce this wonderful, wonderful edifice you see before you. It also has another interesting distinction. As far as we're aware, this building was the site of the first ever decorated Christmas tree. In 1510, we have the first record of the Christmas tree here. A decorated one rather than just a look that fern looks nice in the garden. What else is in this square? Well, over my shoulder there you can see the... let's try my finger in the right place. This statue here, this is a statue of Roland. You might well be asking, well, who the hell is Roland and why has he got a statue? To my surprise, it turns out that even the locals don't know. In the cathedral, which is there, you can see the spire, there is an older version of this statue, which notes that they don't actually know who Roland is. There is some speculation that it might have been the Roland who was one of Charlemagne's knights, but that is just speculation. I mean, he does look vaguely knighty from the front, this one, so I'm assuming it may well be him. But yeah, the bulk of what I wanted to talk about is not actually necessarily the Blackheads here, but one of the main reasons that I wanted to come to Riga is because Riga is a Hanseatic city, or was a Hanseatic city. And I have something of a soft life goal that over the course of my life I will visit all of the Hanseatic cities. There are quite a lot of them, and I have not done all that many of them. But it is a life goal that I will do. So Riga, yeah, after 1221 the locals get control of their own affairs, they get control of the council, they adopt a city constitution for the first time. A little bit later, 1225, they make a few more demands. They get a right to elect some councillors and magistrates, and also that they don't have to pay taxes to the bishop anymore, which is they're very grateful for. But in 1282, Riga joins the Hanseatic League. So what is the Hanseatic League? Why is it important? Why do I find it so interesting? So the Hanseatic League is a peculiarly Northern European thing, particularly a German thing, although it expands far beyond what we now call Germany. It is a trading and defensive confederation of cities. They're primarily free cities, so they're not under some lord. They're self-governing. Some of them are imperial free cities, which is a slightly different thing, where they respond directly to the Emperor of the Holy Roman Empire. Yes, and it's this league. It lasts about 350 years, although it's kind of a bit difficult to tell when it dissolves. So at its height in the sort of 15th century, late 14th, early 15th century, it's got about 200 cities in it that stretch all the way from the Netherlands up into Russia and then south down to Krakow and that part of Poland. It's a very interesting study. It has a legislature, particularly later on. It has a consensus-based deliberative legislature. It has armies. It has an economic system. It has its own laws, and it has pretty much a monopoly on trade across the North Sea and the Baltic. Now you might be thinking, okay, then so it's a country basically. Not quite. It's not quite a country it's not quite the same as something like the Dutch or the English East India Company, where you have what is essentially a state, a country being run by a company. That's not quite what it is. It's not quite that sort of firm. It still has to answer It still has other commitments that aren't that make it not quite the same as that. Although it does have many of the trappings of state. It has law. It declares its own wars. I mean, the Swedish and the Dutch and various others at various points go to war with the Hanseatic League, usually over trading privileges and things. So it does have that as a thing. It does have a presence in England. There's various types. You get the member cities, of which Riga was one. Gdansk, which is another Hanseatic city I visited, was another. The sort of chief Hanseatic city was in Lubeck, the so-called Queen of the Hansa. But it does have a presence in London, England rather. In London, London is one of its contours, which is sort of major trading outposts. The one in London is called the Stahlhof, the Steel Yard. It is in London. It's not there anymore, though there are some remains of it. It's actually now largely under Cannon Street Station. So next time you go through Cannon Street Station, you are passing through what was Hanseatic territory. These sort of trading posts have a degree of extraterritoriality as well. They're a bit like embassies. They're not quite owned by the League, but they have certain privileges over it, and they're not entirely part of their host state. But yeah, other places in England, it goes really as far north as Aberdeen is the most northerly outpost in England, as far west as Bristol. The only Hanseatic site that still stands in England is a warehouse in the town of King's Lynn, which is I've never been to. I keep meaning to do it. I must go. That might be another adventure coming up soon after King's Lynn to look at the Hanseatic warehouse. So yeah, it starts. The League starts to decline in the sort of 16th century. By 1700, to all intents and purposes, it's not there anymore. It's now it's sort of gone. But it does sort of linger on because 1827. I have to write that date down because I'm terrible with dates. I love history, but I'm terrible with dates. In 1827, the US received a delegation and established diplomatic relations with the Hanseatic and Free Cities, which are the sort of last remnants of the Hansa in German lands, in what's then the North German Confederation, or what will shortly rather be the North German Confederation. And even up until German unification in 1871, Britain also maintains diplomatic relations with the Hanseatic cities, which is interesting because by that point there really isn't a Hansa anymore. They've kind of gone. Now, why is the Hansa so interesting? Why do I find it so fascinating? Well, it's partly because of the nature of the organisation, because it has this lineage with the East India companies in India for the English East India Company and around Indonesia for the Dutch East India Company, but also because it's that lineage continues, really. It continues to what we might term in the modern day, and what's certainly called in sci-fi, the mega corporation, the corporation that takes on some of the trappings of the state, or ends up running it. In fact, there are sci-fi novels. There's a series by Kevin J. Anderson which looks at, which is a futuristic space opera, which has the Earth governed by a new Hanseatic League. There is, in fact, already a new Hanseatic League because in the sort of after the Soviet collapse, a lot of the old Hanseatic cities got together again and formed a new Hanseatic League, of which Riga was actually a member until very recently. They withdrew, as did a number of other cities, because the Russians were taking part, so they withdrew after the invasion of Ukraine. So yeah, the Hanseatic League, I just find it an absolutely fascinating entity. It's got some great history to it. It's got some very interesting. It spent a lot of time fighting pirates. It was big on fighting pirates because they stymied trade. There was a particular group of pirates called the Victual Brothers that they had particular shenanigans with. As well as a bit earlier than that, the Joms Vikings and various others. So yes, Hanseatic City, very exciting. I love the Hansa. There's some great books on it. If you want any recommendations, I can absolutely give them to you, because it's something that more people should know about. So yep, that is why we're here. That's why we're here in this beautiful square with the beautiful House of the Blackheads behind us and the statue of the ever mysterious Roland. So I shall speak to you again later, no doubt. So, how about a supplementary little entertaining local legend for you? Just a quick one as I was walking past. This house behind me, this big yellow building here, if you look at the top of it on the turret, one there and one there, you will notice there are two statues of cats, in particular of angry cats. Now, there are two versions of the local legend. The first, the house was built by a local merchant, a wealthy merchant. And there are in fact two versions of the local legend. The first one says that this merchant was very cross, that the members of the Great Guild, which was the primary trading guild, merchants guild at the time, which was based in this building right next to me here, he was very cross that they wouldn't let him in. They wouldn't admit him. There were various different versions of why they wouldn't let him in. Some people say it was because he wasn't German, or he was just not very popular with them. And so the legend, that version of the legend has it that he erected these two angry-looking cats, both facing that building, which is just over there, the Great Guild, with their tails up in the air as a slight to them. The other version of it says that, much like all of us, he was in fact not angry with the Great Guild necessarily, but with politicians, and in particular the Riga City Council, and so that the cats originally faced the tail end towards the Riga Council building. You will notice they're now both facing in opposite directions. Supposedly that's because the council was very annoyed and ordered him that he should either turn them to face the two buildings he was angry at, either the Great Guild or the Town Council. So there you go. There's a little random entertaining legend of the cat house here, and those two angry cats on top of turrets. I mean, I'd be quite angry if I'd been left on a turret as well, I have to be honest. But there you go. Hello everybody, I am back down by the river. I'm actually more or less at exactly the same place. It was on these steps down here that I did my little bit about the pre-Christianization, and this is the statue I was referring to in that. The legend of the chap who took the child across the river that I made the terrible joke about. But something occurred to me after I'd left, and done that little bit. If you look at the neck, it's not going to work very well because of the reflections, but if you look around the neck of this chap, you will notice there is a cross. But Stephen, I hear you cry, I've diligently revised that part of your videos, and wasn't this supposed to be a legend from before the Christianization of this part of the world? Well, says I, yes, well done firstly on doing your revision, and secondly on remembering that. Yes, indeed, this was supposed to be a legend from before Christianization, so why is your man wearing a cross? Now, first I thought this was probably a bit of artistic license by the statue. Obviously this isn't the original statue. But then it occurred to me this might in fact be an example of that thing that Christianity is very, very good at, where it absorbs other traditions and slightly twists them. Obvious examples of that would be Halloween being a slight coincidental take on, well, it's usually written Samhain, but I think it's pronounced Samhain, as I remember is the proper pronunciation of that. But could this be another example of Christianity taking a local myth and then to try and help them Christianize the local population, putting a Christian take on it? Obviously, the biggest traveller in Christian theology is St. Christopher, the patron saint of travellers. And it is no coincidence, surely, that this chap is in fact called Christaps. I was therefore rather delighted that when I was in the Museum of Regan History and Navigation this morning, that there was in fact a section on this and a replica of this statue, which is itself a replica of the earlier one. And indeed it would seem I am correct, that this is a very clear attempt to link a local legend, the legend of Lielius Christaps, Big Christopher. I've terribly pronounced that, I have no doubt. Sorry to any Latvians who are watching. But yes, it's a very obvious attempt to link this legend with the legend of St. Christopher, which of course makes that a much easier story to tell. And the locals at the time go, oh, hang on, we've got one like that. Yes, it's probably something to do with him, isn't it? It's probably St. Christopher. Oh, yes, go on then, we'll have a church. So yes, just wanted to, while I was happy to be walking back in this direction, because I'm going over to the other side of the river again, where I understand there's a little sort of wooden fishing village thing, which I want to have a quick look at. I just thought I'd stop here and show you the statue, because I didn't in the video, and also explore that little wrinkle. So there you go. I don't know whether the fishing village will be worthy of a video. If it is, I'll see you in a couple of minutes. Well, this is very exciting, isn't it? This is the Dalgarve we're going across now, as you might guess. Most of the other footage has been done from that direction down there. I don't think I've taken anything down this end of town. That's the old town over there. You can see the churches, and a bit further down the little white castle. Try and get my finger in the right place there. Oh, there we go. Roughly over there. Yes, very pretty. There is a Doom Fortress there. You will note this Doom Fortress. This Doom Fortress is in fact the National Library of Latvia. They call it the Castle of Light, which is a very good name for a Doom Fortress. I think when I establish my own, I shall call it the Unicorn Palace or something like that. Really put people off the scent. Yes, I shall be back shortly. Well, hello everybody. It is the next day on top of the videos. I don't think we've... I did a little bit of speaking this morning. It is in fact my birthday today, so thank you very much for all the lovely messages I've been receiving. I will get round to responding in person, personally to all of them over the next week or so when I'm back home. Now, the more astute of you will have noticed that I'm not in a city anymore, at least I don't seem to be. And I'm certainly not in Riga. You are quite right to do so. I have taken a little bit of a journey north from Riga, about 30 minutes on the train, to a place called Jurmala, where there is this absolutely lovely 24-kilometre long, so I'm assured, beach onto this sea, which is the Baltic Sea. Unbelievably, there is a lovely pine forest you can see behind me. Unbelievably, that is part of the city. About a third of the city of Jurmala is forest, which is fantastic. It's absolutely lovely, a lovely place to walk around. As I was going around earlier, I was thinking all cities should be like this. So where are we looking? We are looking out to the Baltic Sea, so sort of in that direction over there is Saaremaa, which is an Estonian island, and then Latvia continues down there and then into Estonia up there, and then sort of in that direction a fair distance is Finland. Yes, in traditional British fashion, of course, I forgot to bring any swimming gear because this was a bit of a spur of the moment thing. So I have, as you will note, if I turn my camera down, done that most traditional of British things. I've taken my shoes and socks off and rolled my trouser legs up. And I'm going to have a little paddle in the Baltic because I like to put my feet in any sea I happen to come across that I have never been in before, and I certainly haven't set foot in the Baltic before. So I'm sure it's going to be perfectly warm and pleasant and absolutely fine. And no, it's freezing. That's absolutely... I happen to know because there's a sign down the beach and I did look it up this morning. It's about 11 degrees, the sea at the moment, so it is pretty chilly. It's not entirely unpleasant though, I have to say. Certainly had I brought my swimming gear, I'd have been throwing myself into it with gusto. But for now I shall enjoy simply having a little bit of a splish splash here. Yes, I'm sort of carrying on walking down the beach. I've walked about... I think it's about 6 odd miles from that direction so far. There's a sort of aerial mast thing over there. I'm going to try and get to at least there before I nip back through the little foresty bit and have a little look around the forest and around the rest of the city. It's a nice little city. It's a bit the central sort of shopping street's a bit touristy, a bit Centre Parks perhaps, but other than that, it's just absolutely glorious. All these little wooden houses buried in the trees. It's a little resort town. It is to Riga what I suppose Brighton or Southend would have been to London back in the day. But it's a lot nicer than both of those places, I have to say. So I shall probably speak to you again later. I don't really have anything else planned for today, other than a nice walk and explore around here. Yes, speak soon. Well, go on then, one last video. You'll note I am a little bit singed around the edges. I'm afraid today was rather hotter than I was expecting. And I spent a lovely day on the beach where there was no no tree cover really to hide under. So one last video. What's this going to be? Well, this one is actually one I hadn't expected to do. This building behind me here, that one, is actually the remnants of the chapel of the Order of the Sword, the Livonian Brothers of the Sword, which I mentioned when we were doing our Christianization one as being one of the major organizations that forced the Christianization of the area. So yeah, this building here is their chapel, is what remains of their chapel, obviously being heavily rebuilt and repaired over the years. So I thought, why not take the opportunity to just have a little bit more of a chat about the Livonian Order. So yeah, as I said, they were founded in 1201 by Bishop Albert, the first bishop of Livonia, basically to defend the newly Christianized lands and to hold back the pagan hordes, as it were. They didn't last very long successfully on their own. They only lasted on their own until 1236, when they were defeated pretty heavily by the Semigatians and the Salonians at the Battle of Shaula. And Volquin, their last independent Grand Master, was killed there. And they were absorbed by the Teutonic Order, which was if you recall, was the order of Germanic knights from the Holy Land, which then came up to Christianize this area, and eventually would form the monastic state of the Teutonic Order, a little crusader state up here, not dissimilar from the Terra Mariana. So when they were absorbed by the Teutonic Order, they became formally subject to the order. So their Grand Master was subject to the Hochmeister, the Grand Master of the Teutonic Order. They were notably indisciplined, the Livonian Order. They may have not been independent anymore, but they certainly had an independent streak in them. And at various points they went off on sort of little mini crusades of their own, and even little wars against Christian powers, which weren't entirely, didn't go down all that well in Rome. Again, I mentioned that phrase once already. There's quite a lot in this area that doesn't go down well with Rome. But yes, in fact, one later pope tried to suppress the order and recapture the Livonian Order's castle at Reval, which is now sort of Estonia. It's now Tallinn in Estonia. But they were defeated. The papal army that was sent to do it was defeated by the Livonian Order. So they were clearly skilled enough in their roguish sort of way. And the Livonian Order would continue as part of the Teutonic Order until the mid-16th century. They mounted various expeditions that ended pretty disastrously, probably the most famous being the so-called Battle on the Ice, where they tried to take Novgorod from its rulers and were defeated by Alexander Nevsky, the Battle of the Ice. Battle on the Ice, and eventually the whole thing came to an end when the final Grand Master, Gotthard Keller, not Gotthard, I can't remember his name now. Keller was his surname anyway. But he secularized the order, so he converted to Lutheranism, he converted away from Catholicism, secularized the order, and created the Duchy of Courland and Samogitia, which is that direction, I think, with himself and his family as the Dukes of Courland. So at least he got something out of the whole thing, eh? So that is your final, I think, history post. I might do a little sum up one tomorrow morning while I'm having breakfast before dashing off to the airport. But yes, so I hope you have enjoyed your historical tour of Riga and Livonia. I think we've stepped a little bit beyond the walls of Riga, but I hope you've enjoyed it as much as I have. And we await what the next adventure might be.